and the screen is still not started up. So I think I'm proving my point with some of this tech. And that is one thing that every single automaker is currently suffering from, is the growing pains of all this tech in these vehicles.
Recalls are nothing new in the auto industry, but sometimes they make headlines with bold announcements and mass media coverage. Other times, they're handled much more quietly. Automakers don't always want the public spotlight on their mistakes, especially when it comes to trucks. Vehicles often marketed as the most reliable, dependable machines on the road. Yet over the years, several pickups have been recalled in ways that flew under the radar. Some involved dangerous fire risks, others had defective safety systems, and a few carried design flaws so serious they could have spelled disaster if left unaddressed. In this countdown, we'll uncover 13 pickup trucks that were quietly recalled. These weren't the splashy billion-dollar scandals you may remember, but they affected thousands of owners and revealed hidden weaknesses in trucks that were supposed to be bulletproof. From fuel leaks to faulty airbags, these recalls show that even tough trucks can carry fragile secrets. Number 13. Nissan Frontier. The Nissan Frontier has long been Nissan's dependable mid-size truck, offering affordable toughness for buyers who didn't need a full-size pickup. But between 2010 and 2014, it became the subject of a recall that Nissan handled with little fanfare. At the heart of the issue was the secondary hood latch system, a small but critical safety feature. The defect was simple, yet dangerous. Corrosion and poor design could cause the secondary latch to fail. In cases where owners forgot to fully secure the primary latch, the hood could suddenly fly open while driving at highway speeds. While that might sound minor compared to fire hazards or fuel leaks, it posed an enormous safety risk. Drivers lost visibility in an instant, often at 60 or 70 miles per hour, with accidents inevitable. The recall, which also affected the Nissan Titan and some SUVs, was rolled out quietly. Nissan dealerships replaced the faulty latch assemblies, but the company avoided drawing major public attention to the problem. Many owners weren't even aware their truck was recalled until they received a notice in the mail. Unlike high-profile recalls that dominate headlines, this one slipped under the radar. What made the situation troubling was how preventable it was. Hood latch systems are among the simplest mechanical parts on a vehicle. For a company like Nissan, known for engineering precision, the oversight was embarrassing. More importantly, it showed how even minor components can compromise overall safety. A rugged truck like the Frontier, marketed for adventure and work, shouldn't have been let down by such a basic flaw. The quiet nature of the recall also left some drivers skeptical. Many believed Nissan downplayed the issue to protect the Frontier's reputation in the mid-size market, where it faced stiff competition from the Toyota Tacoma. After all, marketing trucks as dependable becomes tricky when customers hear about recalls tied to overlooked safety features. Today, the affected Frontiers are still on the road, and while the latch issue was corrected, it remains a reminder that recalls aren't always about engines or transmissions. Sometimes, it's the smallest piece of hardware that exposes the biggest weaknesses. And sometimes, companies would rather fix the problem quietly than admit to a serious design slip in public. Number 12. Chevrolet Silverado 1500. The Chevrolet Silverado 1500 is one of the most popular trucks in America, often trading the #1 sales spot with Ford's F-Series. But in 2014 and 2015, GM faced a recall involving this truck that it kept relatively low-key. The issue? faulty power steering systems that could suddenly cut out, creating serious risks for drivers. The defect was linked to electrical problems within the power steering module. Owners reported sudden losses of steering assistance at low speeds, especially when turning into parking lots or making sharp maneuvers. While drivers technically still had control of the wheel, the sudden change in steering effort caught many off guard, leading to near misses and minor crashes. For a truck as large and heavy as the Silverado, losing steering assistance even briefly could be disastrous. GM issued a recall affecting more than 690,000 vehicles, including both the Silverado and its GMC Sierra twin. Dealerships were instructed to reprogram or replace the defective module. But instead of widespread publicity, the recall notice was mailed quietly to owners. It lacked the media spotlight that accompanied GM's ignition switch scandal around the same time, a far larger controversy that dominated headlines. By comparison, the Silverado recall was almost invisible. Why so quiet? Analysts believe GM deliberately kept the messaging subdued to avoid damaging the Silverado's reputation during a critical sales period. The truck was brand new with redesigned styling, advanced technology, and marketing campaigns touting it as stronger and more reliable than ever. Publicizing a steering defect could have undermined that narrative, especially when Ford was preparing to launch its all-aluminum F-150 in 2015. For owners, the recall highlighted how even advanced trucks can stumble over basic safety features. Steering is fundamental, and when it fails, trust in the vehicle is shaken. Silverado buyers expect durability, not glitches that make daily driving stressful. Even though GM corrected the issue, many drivers felt blindsided, especially those who experienced failures before the recall reached them. Today, most people remember the ignition switch debacle, but fewer recall the Silverado steering issue. Yet for the nearly 700,000 trucks involved, it was a reminder that no pickup, no matter how popular, is immune to quiet recalls. And for GM, it underscored a troubling pattern. Handling safety defects as discreetly as possible, even when the trucks affected were sitting at the very heart of the American market. Number 11. Ford Ranger. The Ford Ranger has long been praised as one of the most reliable compact pickups ever made. But for owners of the 2004 to 2011 models, there was a hidden danger that led to one of the largest recalls in truck history. The issue wasn't with the engine, brakes, or fuel system. It was with the airbags. These Rangers were equipped with Tacoma airbag inflators, the same defective components that affected millions of vehicles across different brands. The inflators used a propellant that could deteriorate over time, especially in hot or humid climates. When deployed, instead of cushioning the impact, the airbag could explode with shrapnel, sending metal fragments flying directly into the cabin. At least 2 deaths were linked specifically to exploding airbags in Ford Rangers, one of them involving a truck that had already been recalled but never repaired. What makes this recall stand out is how quietly it was handled at first. Ford initially sent out notices to owners in limited batches, often framing it as a precaution rather than an urgent safety crisis. But as reports mounted and regulators pushed harder, Ford was forced to expand the recall. In total, over 3 million Ford Rangers worldwide were eventually covered. Some recalls even carried "Do Not Drive" warnings, a rare and extreme step highlighting just how dangerous the defect really was. For Ranger owners, the news was shocking. This was a truck known for its simplicity and toughness, a vehicle farmers, contractors, and young drivers depended on daily. Learning that the airbags could turn deadly in a crash shattered the sense of trust many had in Ford's small pickup. Worse still, the quiet handling of the recall left some owners unaware for months, even years, that their truck carried a potentially lethal defect. Ford dealerships eventually replaced the inflators free of charge, but the damage was done. The Ranger's reputation for being safe and reliable had been undercut by a global scandal that Ford initially tried to keep subdued. Even though the Tacoma crisis extended far beyond Ford, the Ranger's role in it highlighted how vulnerable even iconic trucks can be to supplier problems, and how automakers sometimes downplay recalls until public pressure forces transparency. Today, the 2004 to 2011 Ranger is still respected for its durability, but it carries a permanent asterisk in its history. For thousands of owners, it was the truck that came with airbags more dangerous than the crashes they were supposed to protect against. Number 10. Ram 1500. The Ram 1500 has earned a loyal following for its blend of power, comfort, and ruggedness. But the 2013 to 2014 models came with a hidden danger that forced Chrysler, now Stellantis, to issue a quiet recall. The issue wasn't headline-grabbing like massive engine failures or structural flaws, but it was serious enough to cause crashes. A faulty electronic stability control system. The defect stemmed from a software glitch in the anti-lock brake control module. Under certain conditions, the system could completely fail without warning. This meant that drivers lost electronic stability control, ESC, which is essential for maintaining traction during sharp turns, slippery conditions, or emergency maneuvers. In a heavy, full-size truck like the Ram 1500, the loss of ESC could quickly lead to rollovers or loss of control. Chrysler issued a recall for nearly 132,000 Ram 1500s, but the campaign was handled with little publicity. Notices were mailed to owners, and dealerships reprogrammed the control modules at no cost. However, the company didn't draw much attention to the recall, possibly because Ram was in the middle of aggressively marketing itself as a more refined, technology-packed alternative to Ford and Chevrolet. Publicizing a software failure in a core safety system could have undermined that image. The quiet handling of the recall drew criticism from some safety advocates. ESC has been mandatory in all new vehicles since 2012 because it's proven to reduce crashes and save lives. Downplaying the loss of such a critical system, even temporarily, raised questions about Chrysler's priorities. For owners, the defect wasn't always noticeable until it was too late. Unlike a loud engine knock or visible leak, ESC failures were silent, meaning many drivers didn't realize their truck was compromised until they found themselves skidding in wet weather or struggling through an evasive maneuver. The recall was eventually completed for most affected trucks, but the incident left a blemish on the Ram's reputation. At a time when the brand was trying to carve out its identity as a standalone truck division, safety-related recalls risked undermining customer trust. Today, the 2013 to 2014 Ram 1500 is still seen as a solid truck, but enthusiasts and safety experts alike remember the quiet ESC recall as a reminder that even advanced technology can become a liability if not carefully managed. For a brand trying to prove itself, the silence surrounding this recall was almost as damaging as the defect itself. Number 9. GMC Sierra 2500/3500. The GMC Sierra heavy-duty trucks are marketed as professional-grade machines built to haul, tow, and outlast anything on the road. But in 2015 and 2016, these workhorses were quietly recalled for a defect that put both drivers and cargo at serious risk. Faulty hood latch systems. The recall covered thousands of Sierra, 2,500 and 3,500 pickups equipped with diesel engines. The problem was with the secondary hood latch, which could fail due to improper assembly or premature wear. If the primary latch wasn't fully engaged, something that can happen more easily than most drivers realize, the hood could suddenly fly open at highway speeds. The result? Completely obstructed visibility, with drivers forced to react in a split second at 60 or 70 miles per hour. What makes this recall noteworthy is how quietly it was handled. GMC mailed notices to affected owners and had dealerships replace or adjust the latches free of charge. But unlike recalls involving engines or transmissions, this one barely made headlines. GM avoided drawing too much attention, likely because the Sierra was in the middle of a strong sales push against Ford's Superduty and Ram's heavy-duty lineup. A publicized defect in something as basic as a hood latch could have undermined GMC's claims of professional-grade durability. For owners, however, the defect wasn't minor. Imagine towing a trailer or carrying heavy loads when the hood suddenly slams into the windshield. The danger wasn't just to the driver, but to everyone on the road. Some owners even reported near misses, with hoods flying open in traffic before the recall was issued. The quiet recall highlighted a larger issue in the truck industry. Even small components can carry massive consequences. Heavy-duty trucks like the Sierra are often used in demanding conditions where safety and reliability are paramount. A single oversight in something as simple as a latch system can jeopardize lives, loads, and livelihoods. Although GMC fixed the problem, the Sierra's recall serves as a reminder that toughness isn't just about big engines and towing power. It's about the little details, too. For a brand that prides itself on refinement and professionalism, the quiet nature of this recall was almost as telling as the defect itself. Number 8. Toyota Tacoma. The Toyota Tacoma has built a reputation as one of the toughest mid-size trucks in the world, especially beloved by off-roaders and adventure seekers. But between 2005 and 2010, certain Tacoma models became the subject of a recall that Toyota tried to keep relatively quiet. Defective leaf springs that could snap and cause fires. The problem was in the rear suspension. The leaf springs, designed to support the truck's load, were prone to excessive corrosion and premature failure. Over time, the metal could weaken and eventually fracture. In some cases, broken springs punctured the fuel tank or cut through brake lines, leading to leaks. A leaking fuel tank near hot exhaust components created an obvious risk: underbody fires that could destroy the entire truck. Toyota issued a recall covering over 700,000 trucks, including certain Tacoma, Tundra, and Sequoia models. Dealers were instructed to inspect and replace the defective springs, but the company downplayed the campaign in its advertising and public messaging. Instead of highlighting the seriousness of the fire hazard, Toyota framed the recall as a durability upgrade. For Tacoma owners, this was unsettling. Many bought the truck specifically for its reputation as indestructible. To hear that a core structural component could literally snap and set the truck ablaze clashed with the brand's hard-earned image of reliability. Off-road enthusiasts, who put extreme stress on their suspensions, were especially concerned. The recall also raised questions about Toyota's corrosion resistance standards. Trucks are often exposed to harsh environments, from salted winter roads to muddy trails, and suspension components should be designed to withstand such abuse. For a company that had positioned itself as the gold standard in long-lasting pickups, the Tacoma's leaf spring defect was a black eye. Financially, the recall was expensive, but Toyota managed to contain the damage by handling most cases quietly and efficiently. Still, the incident chipped away at the Tacoma's bulletproof reputation. Owners who experienced sudden spring failures and the terrifying aftermath of leaking fuel weren't quick to forget. Today, the Tacoma remains one of the most respected mid-size trucks on the market. But the 2005 to 2010 models carry a shadow in their history. They remind us that even the toughest trucks can be undone by something as simple as a piece of spring steel. And that recalls don't always make headlines, even when lives are on the line. Number 7. Ford F-150. The Ford F-150 is America's best-selling vehicle, with a reputation built on toughness and reliability. But even this iconic truck isn't immune to serious flaws. In 2011 and 2012, Ford issued a recall for the F-150 that it kept surprisingly low profile: spontaneous airbag deployments. The problem stemmed from faulty wiring in the airbag system. Specifically, wires running through the steering wheel column were vulnerable to chafing. Over time, insulation could wear down, exposing the wires and creating electrical shorts. In many cases, this caused the driver's airbag to suddenly deploy without warning. Imagine cruising down the highway or pulling out of a driveway when the airbag explodes in your face, not only startling the driver, but sometimes leading to loss of control and crashes. The recall eventually covered nearly 150,000 trucks, but the way Ford handled it was subdued. Instead of a high-profile announcement, Ford quietly sent notices to owners, instructing them to bring their trucks in for repairs. Technicians replaced the wiring harness and adjusted routing to prevent future chafing. The company framed the problem as a rare occurrence, but reports showed that dozens of owners had already experienced uncommanded airbag deployments before the recall was expanded. For F-150 buyers, the news was alarming. Trucks in this class are marketed as family-safe, all-purpose vehicles. Having airbags, safety devices designed to protect, suddenly turn into hazards undermined that confidence. Worse, because the defect wasn't widely publicized, some owners continued driving unaware that their truck carried a ticking time bomb in the steering column. Ford's decision to handle the recall quietly may have been strategic. The company was in the middle of celebrating record F-150 sales and aggressively marketing its EcoBoost engine technology. Publicly acknowledging a dangerous defect in its best-selling truck could have dented that momentum. Still, for owners affected, the recall was a stark reminder that even the most trusted name in trucks can falter. Airbags are supposed to be a last line of defense in a crash, not a trigger for one. While Ford fixed the issue, the quiet nature of the recall left many questioning whether the company put sales ahead of safety. Today, the 2011 to 2012 F-150s are remembered as part of a rock-solid generation. But the airbag defect stands out as one of the most unnerving chapters in the model's history. Number 6. Chevrolet Colorado. The Chevrolet Colorado was reintroduced in 2015 after a brief hiatus, positioned as GM's fresh entry into the mid-size pickup market. The truck was marketed as versatile, modern, and safer than ever. But its debut year quickly brought an embarrassing recall that GM handled very quietly. The issue? Defective seat frame welds and faulty airbag systems. The recall affected roughly 50,000 Colorados and GMC Canyons, and the problem was twofold. First, certain seat frame welds were incomplete or improperly finished at the factory. In the event of a crash, these weak points could fail, leaving occupants dangerously unprotected. Second, the faulty seat frames sometimes interfered with the airbag sensors, preventing the airbags from deploying when they were needed most. That meant drivers and passengers could face the full brunt of an impact without any cushioning. For a truck that had just relaunched to much fanfare, this was a major black eye. GM was already working to rebuild consumer trust following the massive ignition switch scandal, which had dominated headlines the year before. To avoid drawing more unwanted attention, the company kept the Colorado recall fairly low profile. Owners were notified by mail, dealers quietly reinforced or replaced seat frames, and GM made little effort to publicize the issue. The strategy may have spared GM some immediate embarrassment, but for affected owners, it raised questions. How could such a fundamental safety oversight slip past quality control, especially in a brand-new truck touted as a game-changer? The recall didn't just highlight a defect. It exposed weaknesses in GM's launch process and its willingness to downplay problems. While the 2015 Colorado eventually proved successful and re-established Chevy in the mid-size segment, this recall remains a footnote that safety advocates haven't forgotten. Trucks are supposed to represent toughness and protection, but when the very seats and airbags designed to save lives are compromised, trust erodes quickly. Today, the Colorado is seen as a solid mid-size competitor, but its relaunch year came with a reminder. Even the newest trucks can stumble right out of the gate. And when they do, manufacturers often prefer to handle it quietly rather than admit to a very public failure. Number 5. Toyota Tundra. The Toyota Tundra was built to challenge Detroit's dominance in the full-size truck market. Known for its massive V8 engines and Toyota tough reputation, it quickly won fans among drivers who wanted a reliable alternative to the Ford F-150 or Chevy Silverado. But between 2007 and 2011, the Tundra faced a recall that Toyota downplayed at the time: rusted cross members and spare tire carriers that posed fire and crash risks. The problem was especially bad in states that use heavy amounts of road salt in winter. Corrosion would eat away at the rear cross member, the steel bar supporting the spare tire, and sometimes key suspension parts. In many cases, the spare tire fell directly onto the road. Worse, the corroded metal could rub against fuel lines, creating sparks or ruptures that risked fire. Toyota eventually issued a recall covering more than 110,000 Tundras, but the rollout was quiet. Dealers inspected the undercarriage and either applied corrosion-resistant treatments or replaced the crossmember entirely. In its messaging, Toyota described the action as a service campaign rather than a major recall, a choice that minimized publicity but left many owners confused about the seriousness of the defect. For truck buyers, the issue was troubling. The Tundra was marketed as a rugged, long-lasting workhorse, often showcased in commercials, hauling giant loads or surviving punishing conditions. To discover that basic frame components were rusting out prematurely, sometimes after just a few years, clashed sharply with that image. Owners who depended on their Tundras for towing and heavy-duty work were especially shaken by the thought of catastrophic failures beneath their trucks. The financial and reputational fallout wasn't as devastating as Toyota's 2010 unintended acceleration scandal, but the Tundra's quiet recall chipped away at the brand's bulletproof reputation. Trucks live and die by their perceived toughness, and a defect that literally made the undercarriage crumble was hard to ignore. Today, Toyota has improved rust protection and strengthened undercarriage components in newer Tundras. Still, the 2007 to 2011 models remain a cautionary tale. They proved that even Toyota, often held as the gold standard of reliability, can stumble badly when small oversights combine with real-world conditions. And when they do, the recall doesn't always make headlines, even if the risks are deadly serious. Number 4. Dodge Ram 1500. The Dodge Ram 1500, before Ram was spun off as its own brand, was a strong seller, offering bold styling and impressive power. But for models built between 2009 and 2012, a dangerous defect forced Chrysler to issue a recall that many owners never even heard about. Rear axle problems that could cause sudden wheel lockups and crashes. The defect centered around the rear axle pinion nut. In these trucks, the nut wasn't adequately secured during manufacturing. Over time, it could loosen, allowing the drive shaft to separate from the axle. When that happened, the rear wheels could lock without warning. Imagine cruising on the highway at 70 miles per hour and suddenly losing all stability. The results could be catastrophic. Some drivers reported skids, spins, and crashes linked to the defect. Chrysler eventually recalled over 278,000 trucks, but the campaign was surprisingly subdued. Notices went out quietly, and dealerships replaced or properly secured the pinion nuts. Chrysler avoided splashy announcements, framing the recall as a technical correction rather than a headline-worthy safety crisis. The low-key approach worked to minimize bad press, but it also meant some owners never realized their truck was affected until the defect struck. For Dodge, the problem was particularly embarrassing because it undermined the very essence of the Ram brand: strength and reliability. Trucks in this segment are often purchased by contractors, farmers, and families who need absolute dependability. A rear axle failure, one of the most fundamental components of a truck, represented a glaring weakness. The quiet handling also reflected Chrysler's delicate financial state at the time. Still recovering from bankruptcy and a government bailout, the company couldn't afford another wave of bad publicity. By keeping the recall muted, Dodge protected sales, but at the cost of transparency. In the years since, the Ram 1500 has rebuilt its reputation, winning awards and recognition for refinement. Yet those 2009 to 2012 models stand out as a cautionary tale. Even the most rugged trucks can be undone by overlooked hardware, and sometimes recalls are managed not with loud headlines, but with quiet letters and quick dealer fixes, leaving many owners unaware of just how close their trucks came to disaster. Number 3. GMC Canyon. When GMC reintroduced the Canyon alongside the Chevrolet Colorado, It was meant to give mid-size truck buyers a premium option, stylish, capable, and packed with features. But shortly after launch, the Canyon faced a recall that GMC handled quietly. Faulty seat belt pretensioners and airbag wiring issues that could fail in a crash. The problem stemmed from a combination of defective components in the driver and front passenger seat belt pretensioners. These devices are supposed to tighten the seat belt instantly in a collision, keeping occupants firmly in place. But in some 2015 and 2016 models, the pretensioners could malfunction or fail to deploy at all. Compounding this issue, faulty wiring harnesses in the airbag system sometimes prevented airbags from deploying, leaving drivers and passengers dangerously unprotected in accidents. The recall affected over 81,000 trucks, including Colorado's. Owners were quietly notified, and dealerships inspected and replaced faulty pretensioners and wiring. But GMC made little effort to publicize the issue. Unlike engine or transmission problems that tend to get more media attention, this recall was overshadowed by other GM controversies at the time. For owners, the quiet handling was unsettling. GMC marketed the Canyon as a professional-grade truck, appealing to buyers who valued both toughness and refinement. Learning that the very safety systems designed to protect them might fail in a crash was a serious blow to trust. Worse, some owners only discovered the recall after experiencing warning lights or visiting dealerships for unrelated repairs. Industry analysts suggested GMC's strategy was deliberate. The mid-size truck segment was heating up, with Toyota's Tacoma dominating sales and Honda's Ridgeline about to return. Publicizing safety failures in the Canyon could have crippled its momentum at a crucial moment. By keeping the recall low profile, GMC managed to contain the damage, but at the cost of transparency. Today, the Canyon has improved its reputation and remains a solid contender in the mid-size market. Still, the 2015 to 2016 models are remembered by some as a shaky start. Trucks whose premium image didn't match the reality of compromised safety features. For many buyers, the Canyon's quiet recall reinforced a troubling truth. Sometimes the biggest risks aren't the ones you see coming, but the ones the automaker barely mentions. Number 2. Ford Superduty F250 and F350. The Ford Superduty lineup has long been the go-to choice for contractors, farmers, and heavy haulers who demand uncompromising strength. But even these workhorses aren't immune to design flaws. In 2015, Ford quietly recalled thousands of F250 and F350 Super Duty trucks for a defect involving the parking brake and driveline components that created serious safety risks. The issue centered on the drive shaft and parking brake brackets. Improperly installed or weakly secured brackets could loosen over time. When that happened, the parking brake might not hold the truck in place, especially on an incline. For vehicles weighing over 7,000 pounds and often towing heavy loads, the consequences could be disastrous. Imagine parking your Super Duty on a job site, only to watch it roll away and crash into equipment, property, or worse, people. The recall affected more than 26,000 trucks, yet Ford handled it with minimal publicity. Owners received notices in the mail, and dealerships reinforced or replaced the defective components. But unlike Ford's high-profile recalls involving airbags and ignition systems, this one stayed largely out of the spotlight. The company likely wanted to avoid embarrassing headlines, since the Superduty was a cornerstone of its truck lineup and a critical profit driver. For buyers, the recall undercut the image of indestructibility that Ford had built around its heavy-duty trucks. These vehicles were marketed as "Built Ford Tough," yet something as basic as a parking brake, a fundamental safety system, had been compromised. Many owners didn't realize their truck was affected until they brought it in for unrelated service and were told about the recall. The quiet handling frustrated some safety advocates who argued that recalls involving large, powerful trucks should be communicated more aggressively due to the potential for catastrophic accidents. The Superduty isn't a commuter vehicle. It's a tool, often used in high-risk environments where failure can have outsized consequences. Ford ultimately resolved the issue, but the 2015 recall remains a reminder that even the strongest trucks can have weak points. For the Superduty, the defect didn't destroy its sales dominance, but it did add a blemish to its reputation. And the fact that it was managed so quietly speaks volumes about how automakers sometimes prefer to correct flaws in the shadows rather than risk tarnishing their flagship products. Number 1. Chevrolet Silverado and GMC Sierra. In 2019, GM's flagship pickups, the Chevrolet Silverado 1500 and GMC Sierra 1500, were both brand new, redesigned models aimed at reclaiming ground from Ford's F-150 and Ram's 1500. But not long after launch, they were quietly recalled for a defect that struck at the very heart of safety: brakes that could fail without warning. The problem came from the brake system's electronic stability control module. In affected trucks, a software error could disable the anti-lock braking system ABS and electronic stability control ESC. Drivers might not notice immediately, but in emergency braking situations, the system wouldn't activate. This meant longer stopping distances, reduced stability on slippery roads, and a higher risk of losing control while hauling or towing. For trucks marketed as the safest and most advanced GM had ever built, this was a devastating oversight. GM recalled nearly 350,000 Silverado and Sierra trucks, but the company avoided turning it into a major public story. Notices were mailed, dealerships reprogrammed the control modules, and life moved on. Unlike GM's past scandals, such as the ignition switch crisis, this recall stayed under the radar, overshadowed by the excitement of the new model's launch and flashy marketing campaigns. For owners, though, the implications were serious. Trucks that were barely months old were already being recalled for a core safety feature. Some buyers felt blindsided, having paid premium prices for what they believed were GM's most advanced pickups yet. Instead of peace of mind, they faced questions about whether their new truck would stop safely in an emergency. Industry analysts pointed out that GM had a strong incentive to keep the recall quiet. The full-size pickup market is the most profitable in North America, and Silverado and Sierra sales are vital lifelines for the company. Any dent in consumer trust could shift buyers toward Ford or Ram. By handling the recall quickly but discreetly, GM avoided mass negative press while correcting the defect behind the scenes. Today, the 2019 Silverado and Sierra continue to sell well. But for those who remember the recall, the trucks carry a shadow. They serve as a reminder that even the most modern and expensive pickups can stumble, and that automakers often prefer to fix problems quietly rather than admit their newest flagships weren't as flawless as advertised. Pickup trucks are often sold as the most dependable vehicles on the road, built to handle tough jobs and last for years. But as this countdown showed, even the strongest trucks can carry hidden flaws serious enough to spark recalls. Some of these were small fixes. Others involved life-threatening dangers like fire hazards, airbag failures, or brake malfunctions. And while a few recalls made headlines, many were handled quietly, with little fanfare, as automakers worked behind the scenes to protect sales and reputations. For drivers, though, the lesson is clear. No truck is perfect. Whether you're buying new or used, always check for recall notices and make sure repairs have been done. A recall doesn't automatically make a truck bad, but ignoring one can turn an everyday drive into a dangerous risk. Even the toughest machines sometimes need fixing, and knowing about it is the first step in staying safe.